Welcome to the lecture Definition of Done. Upon completion, you will be able to articulate what definition of done is, to create a simple definition of done for your team, and to know why it is important to have a definition of done. So let's get started. Are we there yet? And this is a difficult question to answer when no one agrees on what exactly there is. And there's always an opportunity to ship code that is far from finished product. That's why agreeing on what we call the definition of done is of critical importance to achieving a consensus on when the project, initiatives, and features are complete. Developers have a reputation for being somewhat careless when answering the question, "Are you done with this feature?" Answer to this question mean done programming, and this is generally what developer will have in mind when answering. However, the meaning of interest is usually are you done programming, creating test data, actually testing, ensuring it's deployable, documenting, etc. It all starts with the common vocabulary. If people aren't speaking the same language, there's ample room for confusion, frustration, and mixed signals. So the moment a product backlog item meets definition of done, an increment is born. The definition of done represents the organizational formal definition of quality for a product backlog items. If the definition of done for an increment is a part of organizational standards, all Scrum team should follow it as a minimum. And if it is not an organizational standard, the Scrum team must create definition of done appropriately for the product. Definition of done is the commitment containing within the increment artifact. Think of the definition of done as what the organization requires before it can deliver a PBI to the end user. For example, in software, a definition of done may be done means coded to standards, reviewed, implemented with unit test-driven development, test with 100% test automation, integrated and documented. In a service context, it might look something like this. Done means every task under the user story has been completed and any work created is attached to the user story so that the product owner can review it and make sure it meets his or her expectations. And this can include Word documents, Excel sheet, presentation decks, emails, or any number of other work produced. So for the product owner to accept the story, these elements need to be attached to the user story for it to be called done. The definition of done ensures everyone on the team knows exactly what is expected of everything the team delivers. It ensures transparency and quality fit for the product and organization. The definition of done promotes transparency by providing everyone a unified understanding of the work completed during the increment. If a product backlog item doesn't meet definition of done, it shouldn't be released or presented at the sprint review. Instead, it is returned to the product backlog for future consideration. While the particulars vary from the organization, a typical definition of done consists of a checklist containing items such as code is peer-reviewed, code is checked in, code is deployed to the test environment, code or feature passes regression testing, code or feature passes smoke testing, code is documented, help documentation is updated, and the feature is okay by the stakeholders. Developers or anybody who is working on the sprint increment must conform to the definition of done. If multiple Scrum teams are collaborating on the product, they must mutually define and comply with the same definition of done. Different companies and development groups will come up with their variants, but they all track back to the same ideal. The code does what it's supposed to do and does not break anything else. Making every feature, release, or sprint go through these steps to ensure done, because it is important to ensure consistent quality and completeness. Now, who defines the definition of done? And this is one of the scrum.org exam questions. If the definition of done for an increment is a part of the standards of the organization, all Scrum team must follow it as a minimum. But if the definition of done is not an organizational standard, the Scrum team must create a definition of done appropriately for the product. Putting definition of done into practice. So defining done is a time saver in the long run since it reduces unnecessary revision later on. When the code meets the definition, everyone has assurance that is ready for prime time. So we already learned that the definition of done is when all conditions or acceptance criteria, and we will talk about that in the next lecture, that a software product must satisfy are met and ready to be accepted by the user, customer, team, or consuming systems. Because we must meet the definition of done to ensure quality. It lowers rework by preventing user stories that don't meet the definition from being promoted to higher level environments. It will prevent features that don't meet the definition from being delivered to the customer or user. Once the definition is in place, it applies to everything, ensuring consistency and quality. So that is why you should apply these rules to every single work item that goes through your task board, as long as it involves coding. Whether it's a large user story with multiple dependencies or tiny bug fix, the person doing the work is expected to run through your definition of done checklist. That it does not mean that everything on your checklist has to be ticked off for every working item. A tiny technical improvement is unlikely to need a marketing email written about it, for example. It does mean that everything in the checklist must be considered for every work item. You should trust your developers to use their judgment. So where to begin? The defining process should be collaborative between stakeholders and those doing the work. Whether it starts with the brainstorming or suggestion by developers, there should be ample opportunity for commitment and unnamed support for the final product. Assigning owners to each criteria is also a good idea, as they can be the arbiter if there is a disagreement among a particular item's ability to check that box. This reinforces consistency and removes any doubt from the equation. And like all well-intentioned methodologies, a definition of done should be as simple and short as possible. The idea is to create consistent quality and not bureaucracy hurdles that slow things down unnecessarily. So the definition of done is contract between the product owner and the team. So it's tempting to want to fit as many items. Definition of done is contract between the product owner and the team. So it's tempting to want to fit as many items into definition of done as possible to ensure the quality of the product. But this can be backfire. When teams are confronted with too many definition of done items, they either work on subset or try and fail to do all of them, eliminating the value of establishing the definition of done in the first place.